Instead of focusing on winning arguments, we're teaching the basic fundamentals of sales and marketing and how we can use them to win in the world of politics, teaching you how to meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. Welcome to The Brian Nichols Show. All right, and with that, joining me on The Brian Nichols Show, he is a libertarian superfan, and I dare say, one of the best libertarian advocates out there. Pat Kerby, welcome to The Brian Nichols Show.
Hey, thank you, sir. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely, Pat. Thank you for joining the program. And number one, thank you for being just a constant supporter. We talked about this before we hit the record button. You're so helpful in terms of not only helping raise awareness for other pro-liberty accounts that are out there, but you yourself, you're out there fighting the good fight, trying to show how we can be effective libertarian storytellers, which is a fundamental part of being a successful libertarian salesperson. So with that being said, let's start off here. I want to introduce you to the Brian Nichols Show audience. Obviously, your video listener can see you're wearing a Ron Paul t-shirt, and that's because let's dig into 2008 and 2012. You were a delegate for none other than the one and only Mr. Ron Paul. But how did that have happened with you starting off here in the greater liberty world?
Well, I have a long history of being a libertarian. I worked on the Andre Maru campaign in 1992. And so when I heard that Ron Paul was running, I just went all in and spent every waking moment. I had to learn. That was the first year our state did a caucus. I had to learn all about the caucus process. I joined in that, was pivotal in my state's strategy for acquiring delegates, and I was elected to be a national delegate both in 2008, 2012. 2008, I didn't get to go because the Republicans shut down our convention. But anyway, so I was deeply involved in the libertarian movement in the Republican Party until after 2012, when I kind of determined that there needed to be a cultural shift before there could be a political shift. Republicans really weren't interested in our message. So that's when I decided to create Max Justice. I'm a TV producer and director. And so I created the Max Justice web series in the hopes that I could attract the gaming age community to libertarianism.
I've heard a lot of people throughout interactions we've done on social media, whenever a thread starts, somebody will pipe in and they'll say, wait, you're Pat Kerby. Where's Max Justice been? And it's because I think people were really reflecting back. They see the love themselves in the stories that you were telling, and you were approaching how to tell not just a libertarian leaning story, but also how to approach a lot of the real life situations that we come across on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's very important because a lot of people are looking for those tools. And I know when we were starting off our conversation today, before we hit the record button, you were mentioning one of the things that you appreciate that I do is to help sell liberty here. And I look at what you're doing is exactly that. It's a tool to help me sell liberty, because there are people out there who are looking for something that can help be that medium to bring them from where they are to where they can be. And it might be, to your point, something like that. If you're a gamer and you're looking and you see, oh my gosh, that's very cool. How would you describe Max Justice? I don't want to incorrectly describe Max Justice. Let's go ahead, have you describe not only Max Justice, but also, Pat, what is the Max Justice world like, and what was the inspiration for this character?
Well, the inspiration for this character is basically whenever I see injustice, I always think, wouldn't it be something if there was someone, who had the power to confront this injustice and just tell them everything they're doing wrong and then maybe blow up their heads or something. And so that was the, the origin of the story idea is like, I want to put someone in a situation that has the power to just appear and prevent injustices and to teach a lesson, to kind of show where philosophically everything's gone wrong, where this injustice is being created. And it's, our first episode that introduced Max Justice was an ISIS episode. And all these episodes are on YouTube. They're only 5 minutes, 5 to 11 minutes. I think that 11 minutes is the longest episode, part of the origin story. And the second episode was a Second Amendment episode. And it's interesting. You talk about how the effectiveness of storytelling. I knew some liberals. I'll call them liberals because they're not as villainous as leftists. They're just, but I knew these people, and I had talked with them about the Second Amendment and the right to self-defense and everything before that, and got nowhere. And then when they saw this episode, they said, I never really thought of it that way, because when they saw the story, they were able to put themselves in the situation and say, you know what, if I'm in a church and with a bunch of my friends and stuff like that, and someone comes in to kill us all, it would actually be pretty nice if one of my friends had a gun and was able to defend us. And putting it in that storytelling context really drove the message home for them a lot better than just arguing about it.
And that's what we've been focusing on over on the program for the past year and a half, 2 years. Stop focusing on winning arguments. Let's actually go ahead and win sales, win converts. And at the end of the day, the reason being, and this is, I cannot stress enough, is because if you have turned somebody off, they will not only not buy from you, but they will actively campaign against you. You will create not somebody who just is not that one-time buyer, but now they will never be a buyer in the future. You have broken that trust, and that's where we need to start building more of that foundation. And it starts with letting what you've done, Pat, and that is help people see themselves in the story. We had Matt Kibbe on the show, and one of the themes that we were going through was to sell liberty more, tell better stories. How powerful is it to be able to actually go ahead and not only tell a story that people can resonate with, but then for them to take it and share with other people? They become, back to the point that our friend Chris Goizetta brings up, they become the super fan, not just of you, but of the principles, of the actual values of the story that you're sharing. And that's one of the actually exciting things we can look to, despite the skew of the liberal media and or the liberal Hollywood elite and such. They still will have stories that will come out every now and then, and unintentionally or sometimes intentionally, and they're snuck right in, do have libertarian themes. I think of the Lego movie. I think of Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. There are movies out there. I mean, the Hunger Games, right? Star Wars. They all have these little sneaky libertarian themes, despite them being intentional or not. And that's something I think we can take and not just throw away and say, Hollywood, yeah, we don't want it, but rather say, hey, that story you love? Here's why it actually is a libertarian theme, and show them why they agree with it, because they enjoy the value of the story. They enjoy the value of the movie, the story, the whatever it may be, the series, but they do so because behind it, behind the characters, behind the actual arc of the character development, there is an underlying something there that they get value from. So when you were going through and you were scripting out Max Justice, what was kind of that underlying theme that you were discovering, Pat?
Well, I've always thought that the power of libertarianism is in the underlying principles. And so every time I would come up with a story and a conflict, I would say, okay, this is how we can expose the underlying principles. In the Second Amendment story, it's the principle of self-defense, which I don't think many leftists have ever even considered. What is your belief on your right to defend your own body? And they just go off with the emotional guns are bad, but they never really consider the principles. And I think that's one of the biggest selling points of libertarianism, is that our principles are aligned with nature, are aligned with human nature, so that by opposing those principles, you're actually violating human nature. And so that's kind of what I want to expose in all the stories, is the underlying principles to each issue.
I'm smiling because all of the fans of the audience from the episode we had with Dr. Adrian Bajan, what is it? Freedom is nature. We saw that because freedom is science. With constructal law, everything in life And literally, that is everything. Whether it's evolution, whether it's a river, whether it's your progression through life, you want to go through the areas of least resistance, to go through an area to expose your ideal sense of freedom. And that is something that we can't ignore. That is nature. So let's help tie that to what people are already experiencing in their day to day. Let's make it easier for them, not more difficult. So what's been the feedback then? I mean, I see it. I see people enjoying Max Justice just from the exchanges like I mentioned back when I'm online. So what was the audience? What's been the reoccurring thing that they're telling you? Hey, Pat, this is why I keep coming back.
Well, that's very interesting, because it's not as popular as I had hoped. My original idea for this was to get it popular enough to do a crowdfunding thing where I could get 50,000 libertarians or 50,000 people who like the message to give me $1, and I could start producing these things and paying people and things like that. All that I have up right now, I've done on my own dime, and it's a pretty expensive hobby. And so the feedback from everyone who's seen it has been magnificent. They all like it and share it and stuff like that, but just not enough people have done it. And I always like to go back and think, okay, what am I doing wrong? And not like say, well, the people aren't supportive enough or something like that. And what am I doing wrong? And maybe you can help me in the sales department here, because that's part of the problem. Is the liberty message is really hard to sell, even when it's packaged in a 5-minute action adventure superhero story. It seems to be really hard to sell. There was I saw a rant by Eric July saying, you know what, we have to support our own. When you see a liberty message and things like that, you have to support it. And I was all excited, and I got on his super chats on the next time he was on and said, hey, have you seen Max Justice? And he goes, I believe I have. And that was it. I mean, one share from Eric July, and I could probably get a much larger audience than I have. But there's another series called Max Justice. So my hope is that he saw that instead of mine and just doesn't think mine sucks.
Well, and let's go back to the question you raised up. Why is it so hard to sell liberty? Well, I think there's an instant gut instinct for the people that we thought we should be targeting, and that is the people who don't agree with us. And I think this is where we've gotten confused in the past. We've looked to who our target market is as almost the other parties, but it's like, okay, let's try and convince them that they're wrong. Instead of saying, who are the people out there that we can talk to that are already open to exploring other options and enter into the conversations that they're already having, the questions that they're already asking. So I would say one of the benefits of what you've already done is you've built the content. This is where our friend Chris, again, will promote what you've done from a marketing perspective, because now it's a matter of just taking that and being able to break it apart into really quick, easy to digest. It could be, minute and a half, 2-minute or so clips, but then you can use that as a tool to hit people who are asking the questions. If there's a particular segment on, let's go back to the point you were raising up about the Second Amendment and the value of being able to have the ability to defend yourself. You could have a very quick, 30-second to a minute or so, zinger clip from Max Justice and have it right there in your back pocket and enter into that conversation they're already having. And then it's a matter of, if they're interested, if they got value from it, now they have a means to go ahead and take that next step, go to the actual site, go to the YouTube page, share it with friends, become a super fan in their own world. Thoughts?
Right. Yeah. No, that's a great idea. I made a bunch of notes and that I wanted to go over with you, and it's all about the ideas of of selling liberty and why it's so difficult. I mean, I wanted to go over all of the things that liberty has going for it, and like we said, it's the It goes along with nature. That we have history is on our side. We've created the greatest nation on world with the lame attempt at liberty. People will say, it's been wrong from the beginning. And, the Lysander Spooner people and say the Constitution couldn't prevent things, so it's useless and things like that. And yet we created the greatest nation on earth, the freest nation on earth. And that was done with libertarian principles. So why is it so hard to sell? I'm baffled by this, and want to think about, if there was principles that we can all agree on, like say power corrupts, that's something everybody can agree on. So, let's build a government based on that agreement. And basically the government that our founders built was it. The foil for corruption is transparency, accountability, and competition. So they built a system that had those things, but now we have none of that. Government is not transparent, not accountable, and basically there's no competition left for it. So why do people keep voting for what we know is never going to stop corruption?
Sunken cost fallacy. This is where Victor and Tony and I had a great conversation back on Monday, I think it was, of last week. And really the conversation centered around this very question. Why is it so hard to get people to make that change? To say, yeah, you know what? Me spending 40 years as a Republican wasn't a good idea. Me spending 30 years as a Democrat wasn't a good idea. I'm going to go ahead and look at being a big L libertarian, or just exploring the ideas of being something other than what I have been. And the problem is that that's just real life years gone, that they now have to make acknowledgement that it wasn't really the most best use of their time, the best use of their energy. And for a lot of people, they've gotten to the point, okay, I'm okay with that. I can embrace the fact that this isn't going to get me the best solution that I'm looking for every single time, but every 4 years, every 2 years, my team might win. And it almost becomes a sport, really. I mean, if you think about it, Pat, it's gotten to this sport mentality where it's my team versus your team.
Exactly.
And it's no longer, let's talk about.
Someone will be a fan of a team even though all the players are different,
right,
than they were 3 years ago, and things like that. So and that's one of the things that I think the only thing that libertarianism, because to me, libertarianism is the battle between collectivism and individualism. And that's kind of how you can dissect these things. When libertarians are infighting and things like that, you could say, okay, well, that's a collectivist principle, so that's not really libertarian. So libertarianism and collectivism, and I think that's the only thing that libertarianism does not go along with human nature, is our tendency towards tribalism. It's the Enlightenment taught us that individualism, that respecting the individual is how we are free, and that it turned the concept of the divine right of kings on its head. And but there's still this tendency towards tribalism that individualism, you have to use your intellect to get through it.
But it makes sense, and this is why it's so hard. And this is why sales is so important, because when we're selling, what we're trying to do is help sell security, which is almost antithesis to the ideas that you're speaking of liberty, of personal autonomy, freedom. And I would actually say, instead of saying it's, we're selling security, you have to sell that solution that creates that feeling of security to that person. You have to give them the ability to make the choice. And I forget who I was speaking to. Darn, it's going to drive me crazy. But I know I just most recently originally talked about this with Adam Krigler. One of the things we were discussing was sometimes people actually do, who it was? It was Larry Sharp. Larry Sharp and I were talking about this because happiness, it's so objective.
Great guy, by the way.
Larry's awesome. I love Larry. And he's running for governor in New York. So pay attention there.
That's so exciting.
Yeah. But happiness, you can get there certain ways. For some people, it's by adding in layers of removing personal liberty, of removing that autonomy. So you look to, any organized religion, there are so many times where you have to make personal sacrifices in order to be involved in that religion. Think of anybody who goes to the gym and works out. You're creating personal sacrifices, but you're also putting yourself through personal pain in some cases to go ahead and get the result you're looking to get. But it's a structure that, while it's limiting you in some certain way, it's helping you obtain and really guide you to that happiness. So we have to almost reverse engineer. And this is where we sometimes get stuck, and why what you just said, we need intellect, is because we need to be able to help create the solution that creates that personal feeling of security and comfort. But we have to do it outside of the public sphere.
Yeah. And the important thing is getting people to differentiate between the short term and the long term, because, short term security is your check from the government. What's that going to do for you long term? And getting people to think long term, this is what I think the founders were. That's what made them so marvelous, is they're able to think, okay, if we apply this, then 50 years from now, this is going to be the result, and that there was an Indian nation that said whenever their council would meet, they would discuss their problems and their potential solutions, and then they would discuss how what the policies that they impose today, how they're going to affect people 7 generations down the road. And I think that is a very wise thing to consider, that the founders did and no politician does today. It's all about getting the
challenge.
Yes.
The challenge, Pat, of getting people to think long term. I deal with it all day long in my day job, because let's just go, let's look at cybersecurity. I'm not even kidding. There are companies who they have factored out, okay, if we get hit with a cybersecurity attack, how much, and there's actually a thing called cybersecurity insurance, how much can we pay per month for our cybersecurity insurance, and then coverage up to a certain amount relative to actually investing in a legitimate cybersecurity solution. And you have to help them understand, like, you're doing a short-term thing. It's not even a thing to protect. It's a matter of just like covering your financial means, really. But like all of the data that could be possibly lost, like you're forgetting all that while you're thinking of that short-term gain. What's happening long-term? You get hit. Yeah, you're able to cover the cost of it, but your customers now are like, you just got hit with a ransomware attack. I'm out, because I know all my information could get compromised in the future. Sorry, not going to take that risk, because people don't like taking risks. So we have to make it as easy as possible for people to make the decision, or at least start to consider alternatives, and show them that the risk isn't as great as they might think it is. And we have to show them at the end of the day too, that the reward, it actually exists, that it's more than just feeling good because you vote third party and you can say, I didn't contribute to the awfulness that's happening right now, but people want to feel my vote matters. And not only that does it matter, but it's helping things get better. That's why you see so many people tie their identities to their political selves, because that's their way of being able to tell people that I'm a good person. I did the right thing. I voted for my team. Woohoo! Because my team represents the collective security. And it's a never-ending cycle.
Yeah, it's true. You would think that as the fear of the gulags gets ever more real and present, that people would be looking for the viable alternatives to turn things around rather quickly, because things are not looking good.
Not only are things not looking good, but we see right now firsthand in places like Australia what happens when people stop taking the personal responsibility role seriously and have abdicated all responsibility to government. And now, and this is the sad part, when you've abdicated your true security, right? Your ability to defend not only yourself, but your family, your livelihood, to the government. Now they are the arbiters of, well, what is your stuff, right? Because now, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? You're gonna vote. You're gonna vote really hard. Vote harder, right? And this is the sad reality of where we are right now. And we have to really start to make a change and get people to start to think differently. But here's the white pill, right? The proverbial white pill. I'm seeing more and more people who I never thought would be saying, hold up, starting to ask more questions. Right. Nicki Minaj, what world is this that I'm agreeing with Nicki Minaj? Draymond Green, I mean, NBA players coming out of the woodwork that I never thought I would be at all supporting for anything. And number one, I really don't care about the NBA. I'm a big football fan. But number two, like you pretty much can guarantee almost all of them are, tried and true Democrats. But I think a lot of them are starting to wake up saying, I can't even ask a question. What's happening?
Yeah, the whole thing is reached such absurd levels of, follow the science, but you can't question the science. Well, wait, science is questioning the science, So, and there's all these absurd things. No, we can't talk about natural immunity. Wait, what? It's all so absurd that yes, that is the white pill that a lot of people are waking up. It's just, what is the line in the sand? Are we going to get to Australia? Is Australia, I always wondered when I read Solzhenitsyn and stuff like that, how did millions and millions of people allow a few thousand people to control them and murder millions of people like this? And, I see it happening because good people don't like to do bad things. And they will resist doing that until the very last minute. And sometimes the last minute was too late. And then you find yourself alone.
Sometimes the last minute is too late, and then you find yourself alone. Truer words have not been spoken on the Brian Nichols Show since last episode, Patrick Kerby. Thank you so much for all your insight. We want people to obviously continue the conversation. Where can folks go ahead and follow you on social media, and also find Max Justice TV?
Max Justice is maxjustice.tv is the website. The YouTube channel is Max Justice. There's another one, so make sure you get the one with this guy that's behind me. My Twitter is let me just find it. It used to be Max Justice for All, but that got fried. So
isn't now Twitter nice?
Yeah. Now I'm Patrick B. Kerby on Twitter.
Fantastic.
Spelled Kerby. Check it out. Check out my timeline. There's Liberty Gold there, dating back to whenever it started. And follow and support the Brian Nichols Show and learn about how to sell liberty.
Thank you so much, Patrick. We appreciate all the love and support truly here from not only myself, but also the team at the Brian Nichols Show. And yes, folks, if you want to go ahead and learn more about Pat, but also learn more about Max Justice, go ahead and click the artwork on your podcast catcher. It will bring you right to briannicholsshow.com, where you can find all 350 plus episodes, my goodness, of the Brian Nichols Show, including today's episode with all these social media links, transcription for the entire episode, and the video version of the episode as well today. Patrick Kerby, thanks for joining the program.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for listening to the Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.